We have a brand new week here on Advent, and we've got an interesting beginning to the week, obviously. This is December 8th. It has an interesting history in the secular world, but it also has an interesting history, obviously, with ourselves, because this is the solemnity of the Immaculate Conception. The Immaculate Conception is the patroness of the United States. You know, every country has a patron or patroness, and for the United States, the patroness is the Immaculate Conception. And that's why, if you're in Washington, D.C., on the property of Catholic University of America, which, by the way, is its own stop on the, I guess it's called the Metro down there. Is that what it's called? Own stop on the Metro. That's where you find it. So say, well, I'm in Washington, D.C. How do I find this Basilica of the Immaculate Conception? Go to the CUA, I think it's called CUA Brooklyn or Brooklyn CUA. Stop and look up and look for the big dome. And if you can't see it, just kind of walk towards the property of CUA. You'll see it. And then that'll bring you right to the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception. A beautiful place. I absolutely love it. It's a wonderful place. Now, an interesting little thing about this basilica, actually I shouldn't say little thing, there's nothing little in the basilica. It's a beautiful holy place. It's wonderful. I mentioned this last week, there is an image there of Our Lady Aparecida, Nossa Senhora Aparecida, which is Brazilian for Our Lady Appeared. And there is an image similar to what you'll see in Guadalupe, except this is a figurine, I guess you'd call it, that was discovered in the believe it's the 15 or 1600. And it's a little story there. I'm not going to go into it right now. I talked a little bit about it last week. The image, which was discovered, no one knows the origin of the image at all. The image was discovered, and this image is of the Immaculate Conception. The same. So there is an interesting connection between Brazil and the United States. Now, I know I have this little edge to what I'm preaching, but I have to say it. Last year, there was a great ceremony. They had bishops up from Brazil. They had Brazilians from all over the country. This was back in, or maybe it was 2 years ago. Yeah, it was. It was 2 years ago. The big celebration of bringing a replica of this image and putting it into the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception here in the United States. It's got the same thing as the same figurine, in a sense, of the Immaculate Conception. Cardinal Sean O'Malley, who at the time, I believe, was the cardinal of the Archbishop of Boston. I say I believe because it was before he formally retired, and now we have Archbishop Richard Henning. So he celebrated the Mass, and it was a great celebration. Did you see it in American Catholic media? No! Why? Another reason. I mean, they might have had a little blurb. This was huge. And you know I work for Consal Nova. I'm part of the community. They don't pay me. I work for Consal Nova. I do things for Consal Nova. For them, by the way, I have been the voice of some of the English language patriarchs, including, the priests and leaders out there, including Cardinal Pizzaballa, his father, Monsignor, or Father Pizzaballa then. So I've been his voice, his English language voice. They do a voiceover and I'm the voice. So in any case, in this ceremony was transmitted, I think by the internet, transmitted from Washington to Brazil, to Cachoeira Paulista, Brazil, and it was broadcast throughout Brazil, throughout the world, on the Consal Nova TV network. Was it broadcast here in the United States? No. Enough said. And this is why I get really frustrated with American Catholic media, because this was huge. And it's huge within the context of the church, because you realize these are two countries which are in two different hemispheres, technically on two continents. The Brazilians consider the American continent to be one continent. We consider it two. and two different countries, two different languages, two different cultures, yet we share the one image in two different styles of the Immaculate Conception. And I think that was just so powerful, but you know that I have this edge on my disagreement with American Catholic media. And so there you go. And this is why this is a powerful celebration for us, a powerful solemnity. Mary is the patroness of the United States. So we take that, Mary as the Immaculate Conception. Very powerful celebration. So if you have a chance, go to the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C. I told you how to get there. If you happen to go to Washington, take the metro to Brooklyn CUA, get off, walk to the Basilica. Now you can drive there too. I have no clue how to drive there. I've only been there by metro. So there you go. Now, on another thing that's all part of this is by the way, the other basilica, which is the Our Lady Aparecida in Brazil, which is huge, also huge. It's actually bigger, and that's a wonderful place, absolutely wonderful place as well. And that has the original image, which you can go see. It also has a fascinating dynamic. I get the biggest kick out of this. They have a chapel for various things. They have various chapels. One of them is a chapel of the resurrection. So you go to it. There's nothing in there. Expecting this real fancy and pictures and statues and all. You walk in, it's like, there's nothing here. And then you go, oh, I get it. So anyway, there you go. There you go. Immaculate Conception. And why is this day so important? And why are we reading from the book of Genesis today? Why is that your first reading? We have 3 readings today. Why? Why? Well, I'll tell you why. This is why the Catholics celebrate Mary. We worship God. We venerate Mary. And this is why when priests tell you, and there's a priest running now saying that because of Eve, we have to make women submit to the man, to the husband, and we have there is such a priest. And we have to make sure because she is too powerful, so she must be, I don't know the word he uses, but you can see where I'm going with this. Why that's wrong? Because Mary blessed women. Here's the situation. Through Eve's saying yes to the snake, the devil, original sin entered into the world. Now, it actually entered in through Adam, but Eve was kind of like the door, and then comes Adam. So through Adam and Eve, we have original sin. Mary, as we see, is predicted at this point. Prophecy. Remember, Benedict XVI called it a prophecy. The story in Genesis, a prophecy. So this is a prophecy. Mary will bring forth offspring, and then we see that she and the snake will be at enmity. We see that. And the offspring will be at enmity. So we see all that. Mary is the Immaculate Conception because she has to reverse Eve as Jesus reverses original sin. Both of them do this through obedience, and Mary's obedience and being sinless reverses the effects of Eve. That's why we venerate Mary. Mary is sinless because she has to reverse Eve. Do you understand that? And by doing so, this whole concept that women have to suffer because of Eve, when you hear, and there is a priest on the internet who preaches this stuff all the time, and I'm sorry, I said it on Friday, I'll say it again, and the bishops don't silence him. And I don't mean that he should be silenced, he should be corrected. But they don't. He's this all the time, and he's out preaching this stuff. No. Mary is basically the redemption of Eve, not the redemption of humanity. That's only done through Jesus, including Eve. And Mary needed a Savior too. But Mary is the redemption of Eve. In other words, that whole concept of women have to suffer because of Eve is wrong. That was ended with Mary. And you might say, well, you're telling me it existed before that? I wasn't there. I'm just saying the people who say it now, no, that's not true. Now, you have, so this is a really important concept. Remember, Mary is known, especially in the Orthodox world, as Theotokos, which literally, it's Greek for the God bearer. Mary is also known in the same way as the tabernacle of Jesus. She is tabernacle. In other words, she brings forth God. So, and this is all begins with the Immaculate Conception. So we understand that. So we see the Immaculate Conception, we see Mary, we see that whole reality, we see that whole understanding, the Immaculate Conception, and this is what we see, this whole reality, this whole teaching, this whole understanding. And Mary reverses the effects of Eve, and Jesus reverses the effects of sin. So this is why we venerate Mary. And when people turn around and say, oh, you think Mary's so good and she's a sinner. She's a sinner. No, because if she was a sinner, she couldn't reverse Eve. She gives total obedience to God. This was her mission in life, to be totally obedient to the Father. Okay? So this was her mission in life, be totally obedient to the Father. And so she is totally obedient to the Father. And as she says, be unto me, let it be unto me according to your word. And so we see this. This is powerful. And you also understand the signs of reversal. It's an angel who gets Eve to sin. It's an angel who gets Mary to be open to total obedience. It's an angel who invites Eve to become like gods, fallen angel, to become like gods. It is an angel who calls us to recognize the true God. Now, an interesting thing to keep in mind, I'm pretty sure this is from Cardinal Sarah, who brings out that the temptation is for the whole concept of the temptation is that we will become like gods. What is it that God makes us? We will become like God. Well, what's the difference? Someone said, well, what's the difference? Isn't that the first temptation? Wait a minute, that's the first temptation. No. He says, you're right, but the first temptation is to take divinity for ourselves. The reality is God gives us divinity. One of the interesting things that you got these people who, you shouldn't be receiving communion in the hand, and this is the worst thing that can happen. Well, that's not true. This whole thing, I had this vision and this great saint appeared to me and said, anyone who can receive communion in the hand is going to hell. You got these people preaching this junk. Okay? There is a huge symbol. By the way, the teaching of how to receive communion in the hand comes from the early centuries, comes from one of the fathers of the church, Tertullian. So in the early days of the church. So when you receive communion in the hand because you receive Christ. Now, there are some people who come up to communion and they will take it, right? No. There are exceptions. Someone can't receive it in the hand. I do that in the hospital. Sometimes someone will take it. And I know the symbolism, but you're also dealing with someone who is in a position that maybe they can't receive it in the hand. But generally, yes, when you're at Mass, you're walking up to you receive communion, you put your hand out and you receive Christ because you don't take him. That was the whole point. You receive Christ. He gives himself to you and you give him yourself to him. This is the powerful reality. So in receiving communion in the hand, there's an incredibly powerful symbol there. And and I know these people are proclaiming this whole thing. Let's get back and speak in Latin and stuff. That's them. But there are a lot of things they teach that is wrong. And anything that oppresses women, that tells you you're going to hell because you received communion in your hand, misses the real reality, the real teaching that we see. For example, on this day, the Immaculate Conception is essential to the whole process that leads to our salvation in Jesus Christ. We're going to be right back right after this. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Did you know that the Catholic Audio Media Podcast is available on various podcast platforms? You can find us, among others, on Podbean, which is our home platform. You can find it on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeart, among others. Just look for Catholic Audio Media, all one word. On some platforms, such as Spotify, look for Catholic Audio Media, 3 words, and subscribe and listen to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back. You may remember on Friday's program, and some of you may have had some technical difficulties with Friday's program. For some reason, it kept buffering, and I don't know why. And I listened to another episode when I was listening to it, check it out, that, and I didn't find this buffering. But here I was going through this buffering. I said, what the heck is this? So I don't know. Hopefully the program you're listening to now isn't buffering. So you may not have heard Friday's program. But I talked about the nativity scene at St. Susanna's in Dedham, and I talked about how the media, the secular media, covered this, and I said, whether you agree with the actions of the pastor there, Father Steve Gisoma, at St. Susanna's in Dedham, whether you believe in the actions or not, by the fact that this was covered on the local news and the local media, the local radio. And I had mentioned specifically Jim Polito, who I listen to regularly on Talk 1200 AM here in the Boston area. And one of the things I said about Jim Polito, I listen to him every morning, starting about 6 o'clock, and I listen to him a little while, and then I have a routine I do. But one of the reasons why I listen to him and I enjoy him is he comes out of WTAG in Worcester, and he talks about the entire state of Massachusetts. Most of the radio stations in the area talk about Boston. Everything's Boston or Metro Boston, the local areas of Boston. But he talks about the entire state, things going on in each of the states. Now, I don't necessarily agree with Jim Polito politically, but from a perspective of, hey, what's going on in the entire state, that's great. Because, I don't call myself being from Boston or Brockton at that point. I call myself being actually from New England and or Massachusetts, because I'm from Massachusetts, and Massachusetts is a big state, and I love this state. So do you understand? So I love the way he does it. And he has a guy by the name of Tom Bevilacqua who does his weather, and he talks about the entire state. So this stuff is really why I listen to him. Now, that was not a paid endorsement, but he did not like what Father Steve Gisoma did with the nativity scene. And what he did, if you didn't know, is you had the nativity scene and the baby Jesus was missing, and there was a sign there that said ICE was here. And Father Steve Gisoma does these political statements with the nativity every year. Now, interesting thing, sometimes he may come in to do a mass, especially when I was in Alston. He would occasionally, the family would ask him to do a funeral mass, for example, because he'd be a relative of the family. And people would say, well, we don't know who's this Father Steve Gisoma. And I would say, do you ever watch around Christmas? There's this guy that does this nativity scene at his parish, this pastor. That's him. And they go, oh, yeah, we remember that. See? So if you remember what I said from a marketing perspective, the decision, because he got so much airtime for free, was right on the money. That doesn't necessarily say I agree with the theological, and I had said that, or the political or anything else. I just said from a marketing perspective, he was right on the money. And the people who covered him in TV and on radio would know that. They were fully aware of, hey, this is a marketing home run. Now, the response is, but theologically, how do you respond? Well, that's a whole different story, and this is where the Archdiocese comes in, and the Archdiocese said we don't like this, and we'll see if everything changes. I make a prediction right now, but you've got to understand what I mean by my prediction, because people will interpret it wrong. I think Father Steve Gisoma will be moved to another parish. And I'll tell you the reason why. Not because the reason why is really simple. Father Steve Gisoma has been at that parish for 24 years, I think, somewhere around there, maybe even more. I think it's 24 years. And the new archbishop doesn't like to see pastors there for that long. So I have a feeling that Father Steve Gisoma will find a new assignment, and people are going to say, that's because he's being punished for the nativity scene. No, I think that will prove to be because the archbishop doesn't want priests in a parish for 24 years. So just so you know, that's my prediction. But in any case, the Archbishop has spoken and made it clear that we do not make political statements with nativity. Okay, fine. And there you go. And that's an interesting point, because obviously, though, the whole point of the nativity is for our understanding of the worship of, what Jesus has done for us, the incarnation. However, you do realize that the whole story of Jesus has a lot of, this is the whole point. This is why I do the ministry I do. It has a lot of real world stuff in it. There's people coming, and there's no room at the inn, and there's this, that, and the other thing, and they have to find a place and the whole bit. That's all real world stuff. And that's what Father Steve Gisoma was also doing. And, I can see the point of people who are complaining, but from a marketing perspective, that was a home run. I got news for you. In any case, we are talking about different, that's what I do here. I talk about, and I want to do a little bit more of talking about the news issues in light of the religious issues that we deal with, because that's an important consideration. You have to realize that Jesus came into the real world. And my homily for yesterday talks about, and I do this every year, it's second Sunday of Advent. We have the story of John the Baptist, and I always bring out the real world figure that people very often miss. And that is this. You have John the Baptist, who is out preaching and calling people to repent, to change their lives. The kingdom of God is at hand. But when he shows up, when he appears and he shows up, you can imagine a great big clock appearing behind him, which obviously wouldn't be from the time, because they didn't have clocks. That's one of the things I always bring out. When Jesus says, an hour, he doesn't mean an actual 60 minutes. I always bring that out. Doesn't mean it, because they didn't have watches at that time. Watches didn't come until several centuries later. I think maybe 1,000 years. But in any case, so they didn't have watches. But you just imagine you putting a timer behind him, and the timer counts down 40 years. Because everything that is there in Jerusalem and everything that is there in Judah disappears in 40 years. The temple will be destroyed, and all of the Jewish state at the time, which was Judah, will be eliminated by the Romans in 70 AD, and this is happening in the 30s. So AD. So you can see, you have to realize that all this stuff is still going on within the political world behind it. Now, let's talk about a whole different ballgame. Let's just throw on a little politics in light of the nativity scene. what if, because of immigration, Jesus was going to be born in the United States, but decided to, and this is going on right now, self-deport, the whole family self-deport back to Israel, whatever. That would be a similar situation to what we see here. It really would. When I was in Chelsea, Massachusetts, we used to get phone calls from the local authority there in the airport, and they would say, a family just got off a plane. They came here to the United States. They have absolutely no place to go. Do you know of any place? Unfortunately, we didn't. We would refer them to some shelters or some social organizations, but we'd get that every so often. So there is remember, all of the Gospels do happen within a real world environment. And the Gospel we're looking at yesterday and this time of Advent all takes place prior to the beginning of what ultimately becomes the end of the Jewish state and the temple, not the Jewish people, of course, but the Jewish state and the temple not to exist, the Jewish state not to exist until 1948. We're going to be right back right after this. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Are you looking for guidance on how to live a purposeful and transformed life? Look no further than Romans 12, a chapter in the New Testament that offers practical wisdom for believers. Romans 12 begins with a powerful call to offer our bodies as living sacrifices to God, urging us to renew our minds and align them with His will. This chapter highlights the importance of humility, using our gifts for the benefit of others, and exercising genuine love. It teaches us to be diligent in serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, persevering in tribulation, and being devoted to prayer. But it doesn't stop there. Romans 12 also teaches us to live in harmony with others, extending kindness and hospitality even to our enemies. It urges us to overcome evil with good and leave vengeance to God. So if you're seeking guidance on how to live a life of love, humility, and service, dive into Romans 12. Let its practical wisdom transform your life. Romans 12, a chapter that offers a roadmap to living a purposeful and transformed Christian life. Available now in the New Testament. Get your copy today. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back. Tomorrow, we have one of my favorite saints, and I know very little about him. It's one of my favorite stories, because this week is the powerful week of December 7th, which of course begins with remembering Pearl Harbor, which we did at Mass yesterday, all the way to the 14th. Well, in the midst of that is the 9th and the 12th. And what's so important about the 9th and the 12th? The memorial of Saint Juan Diego, one of my favorite saints. He is the saint who to whom Mary appeared in what became Our Lady of Guadalupe, who we remember on December 12th. Fascinating. So these are a couple feasts this week. By the way, I hope you noticed that on December 6th was the feast of St. Nicholas. And by the way, by the way, also remember that NORAD tracks Santa. I love to tell people that. Do you know the United States Air Force every year tracks Santa? Really? Yes. NORAD tracks Santa. Look it up on your favorite search engine and learn all about NORAD tracking Santa. NORAD tracks Santa. And there you go. NORAD tracks Santa. The U.S. Air Force tracks Santa. Yes, it's wonderful. Anyway, we'll be back tomorrow. Have yourself a blessed day. The Catholic teaching in this podcast is reflected and presented as accurately as possible. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Archdiocese of Boston or any other institution.